What's going on, everybody? It's me again, the always controversial gold and blue dude. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with me or disagree with me. It's all about entertaining you because it is a long off season for college football and I'm here to get you through it. So please hit that like and subscribe button and help us get to that 10,000 subscriber mark. Don't forget to check out our Patreon page. A lot of time and effort going into that. And I call my Patreons the shot callers because I let them call the shots with video ideas and what teams I do previews and predictions first this year. We also have a great website designed and created by Joey Foster, 8 great writers led by our head writer Michael Walker. And I can't forget about our merchandise store. A lot of great stuff over there, and as you can see, I have my 2 t-shirts. I'm sure you'll find something for you. On to today's video, and it's the updated top 25 for ESPN. Not one single game has been played and they're already bumping teams up and bumping teams down in their rankings. Not a single down has been played and already some shifts in ESPN's top 25. It makes no sense, but it makes for great entertainment. So here we go. We'll start at the top and work our way down. Number 1, Alabama. That stays the same. I agree with ESPN here. I think Alabama will be the best team in the nation in 2022. Last year they went 13-2. Number 2 recruiting class. 5 offensive starters and 7 defensive starters will be back. And last year they averaged 39.9 points per game. That was number 6, and allowed 20.1 points per game. That was number 18. Alabama will be a great team. Number 2, Ohio State. That also stays the same, and I agree with ESPN here. They went 11-2 last year. Number 4 recruiting class. 6 offensive starters and 7 defensive starters coming back. They averaged 45.7 offensive yards per game. That was number 1, and allowed 22.8 points per game, and that was number 38. Number 3, Georgia also stays the same. I kind of agree with that. They went 14-1 last year, national champs. The number 3 recruiting class. 7 offensive starters coming back, but only 4 defensive starters coming back. That is the key number right there. Last year they averaged 38.6 points per game. That was number 9, but allowed just 10.2 points per game. Number 1. Definitely the best defense last year, maybe of all time. Number 4, this one's a little surprising, guys. Utah up 3 spots. Last year they went 10-4. The number 38 recruiting class. 6 offensive starters and 6 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 36.1 points per game. That was number 14, and allowed 22.6 points per game. That was number 35. I'm not sure if I would have Utah this high. I would definitely have Utah ranked, but top 5, that's a little much. You might be in for a little bit of a disappointment there, ESPN. Number 5, Texas A&M falling down 1 spot. Last year they went 8-4, had the number 1 recruiting class, 6 offensive starters coming back, but just 4 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 29.3 points per game. That was bad, number 56, but allowed just 15.9 points per game. That was number 3, and that's why I think Texas A&M is ranked too high. Only 4 of those starters are coming back. I would not have Texas A&M even in the top 10. Number 6 for ESPN, Notre Dame. That stays the same. Last year they went 11-2. The number 7 recruiting class, 7 offensive starters and 7 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 35.2 points per game. That was number 20, and allowed 19.7 points per game. Number 15. Pretty good stats right there. The biggest if, though, is a big coaching change. I don't have an issue with this, just a lot of uncertainty in South Bend. Number 7, how about this? NC State, the highest ranked ACC team, up 1 spot. They went 9-3 last year. The number 64 recruiting class, that's not good, but what is good, 8 offensive starters coming back and 9 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 33.1 points per game. That was number 28, and allowed 19.7 points per game. Number 14, NC State will be a legitimate contender in the ACC. Dave Dorn hasn't proved that he can be a top 10 coach just yet. Number 8 on this list, Michigan State up 2 spots. Last year they went 11-2. Number 23 recruiting class, 5 offensive starters come back and 9 defensive starters come back. Last year they averaged 31.8 points per game. That's 39th, and allowed 25.3 points per game. That was number 54. So okay stats, but they had a great record. However, they lost their best running back, and that is a big deal. I would not have Michigan State in the top 10. Top 25, yes. Top 10, no. Number 9 for ESPN, Michigan. They actually fell 4 spots for whatever reason. I don't know. Last year they went 12-2. The number 9 recruiting class, pretty good recruiting class. 8 offensive starters coming back, but only 4 defensive starters coming back. Okay, that makes a little more sense. They averaged 35.8 points per game. Number 16, pretty good offense, but only allowed 17.4 points per game. Number 8, so their strength was on defense, and they lost a bunch of starters. Number 10, Oklahoma State, down 1 spot. Last year they went 12-2. Number 29 recruiting class, 7 offensive starters coming back, but only 4 defensive starters coming back, which was their strength. Last year they averaged 31.1 points per game. That was number 46, but allowed just 18.1 points per game. That was number 9. Oklahoma State could be set for a step back year, but they do have a great coach in Mike Gundy. It's just, I don't think that defense will be quite as good as what it was last year. I would not have them in the top 10. Number 11 on this list, Clemson. They stay the same, 10-3 last year. The number 10 recruiting class. 10 offensive starters coming back and 6 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 26.3 points per game. That's the problem. That was number 82. They only allowed 14.8 points per game, number 2. So this is kind of back and forth for me. They returned a lot of offensive starters, but they didn't have a good offense. And they do return 6 defensive starters from that pretty good defense. I would have Clemson in the top 10, right up there with NC State, maybe above NC State. I would have Clemson in the top 10 and NC State not in the top 10. I trust Clemson's coaching staff more than NC State's at this point. Number 12, this one makes absolutely no sense. USC, and they are up 10 spots. What in the world? Last year they went 4-8, only the number 65 recruiting class, 6 offensive starters and 5 defensive starters coming back. They averaged 28.7 points per game, that was number 65, and allowed 31.8 points per game, that was 103rd. There is no way USC is going to be that much better. This ranking makes absolutely no sense, and I'm not saying USC won't have a better year than what they did last year. I do think they will. Lincoln Riley will have some offense for the Pac-12, but that much better? Not sure about that. Number 13, Houston. This stays the same. They went 12-2 last year, but only the number 15 recruiting class. 7 offensive starters and 5 defensive starters are coming back. They averaged 35.9 points per game, that was number 15. Allowed just 20.4 points per game, that was number 19. So their strength was actually both sides of the ball. They had a good defense as well, but only 5 starters are coming back from that defense. Houston could be a little bit worse than what they were last year, but still a top 25 team. Number 14, Oklahoma, up 3 spots. Last year went 11-2. The number 8 recruiting class, 4 offensive starters and 5 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 39.1 points per game, number 8 in the nation, and allowed 25.8 points per game. That was number 60. A lot of questions at Oklahoma. I'm okay with this ranking, but I'm not quite sure if they're actually a top 15 team. We're actually going to run a contest through this college football season for College Game Day. If you can get a Golden Blue Dude sign onto College Game Day, we will award you a $100 credit for the merchandise store. And yes, you can win multiple times. So if you can get the sign up on there 3 times, that's $300 towards our merchandise store. And if we have weeks to where there's multiple entries, then I'll have to look and see who has the best sign. But I'll still award those other entries for that week some smaller prizes. So make the best Golden Blue Dude sign possible and get on College Game Day. Number 15 for ESPN, and this is the whole reason for the title of this video. Ruined my day, ESPN. Out of nowhere, up 10 spots from non-ranked to number 15. Pitt, are you kidding me? They went 11-3 last year. Number 74 recruiting class, that's not good at all. 8 offensive starters coming back and 7 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 41.4 points per game, number 3 in the nation, but a lot of that was to Kenny Pickett. I know, they got Keaton Slovis, but from what I'm hearing from Pitt fans, they didn't like what they saw in the spring game. And they allowed 23.6 points per game, number 42, so not a great defense. I would definitely not have Pitt ranked this high. Maybe a top 25 team, but not top 15. Come on, ESPN. Number 16, Oregon, down 4 spots. They went 10-4 last year, number 13 recruiting class, 6 offensive starters and 7 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 31.4 points per game, that was number 42, and allowed 27 points per game, that was number 75. I don't see that big of an improvement for Oregon. They get a new coaching staff. I think Oregon's a bit overranked in the preseason. I'm not saying that they're not going to be any good. I just think 16 is a little high for Oregon, much like Utah at number 4. That's way too high for Utah. Number 17 on this list, Wake Forest, down 3 spots. Last year they went 11-3, number 71 recruiting class. 8 offensive starters coming back and 6 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 41 points per game, that was number 4, and allowed 28.9 points per game, number 88. So their weakness was their defense, and I think once again that will be the case this year. I think Wake Forest will have a great offense, but their defense is not going to be very good, and their schedule will not do them any favors. I think Wake Forest will be a decent team, but they will have a few more losses than what they did last year. Number 18 on this list, Baylor, down 2 spots. Last year they went 12-2, number 36 recruiting class. 7 offensive starters, 6 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 31.6 points per game, that was number 40. I'm actually shocked about that, but only allowed 18.3 points per game, number 10 in the nation. I agree with this. In fact, I would have Baylor ranked a little bit higher. Baylor's going to be a contender in the Big 12 this year. Number 19 on this list, BYU, down 1 spot. Last year they went 10-3, the number 55 recruiting class. 8 offensive starters coming back, but all 11 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 33.1 points per game, that was 29th, and allowed 24.8 points per game, that's 52nd. I think their defense will be the strength of this team. They did lose that running back, Al Jareer. That's a big deal, but not big enough for BYU to have a massive step back here. I think once again BYU will have a 10-win season. I'm good with this ranking. ranking. Number 20, Arkansas stays the same. Last year they went 9-4 with the toughest schedule in the nation. Not bad at all. In the number 28 recruiting class, 6 offensive starters, but just 3 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 30.9 points per game. That was 48, and allowed 22.9 points per game. That was 39. I like Arkansas, but I expect Arkansas to take a step back this year because they lost a ton from that defense. Offense will be pretty good though. I don't think they'll finish in the top 25 this year. Sorry, Arkansas fans. 7-5, 8-4, maybe right there at 25-24. Number 21 on this list, Ole Miss, up 2 spots. Last year they went 10-3. Number 24 recruiting class, 5 offensive starters and 6 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 33.7 points per game. That was number 24. And allowed 24.7 points per game. That was number 51. That defense got fixed a little bit last year, but it needs to be fixed a little bit more this year. I like their offense, and I think they have a decent shot to upset Alabama in Oxford. I'm okay with this ranking. In fact, I'd probably have Ole Miss in the top 20. Number 22, Kentucky, down 1 spot. They went 10-3 last year. Number 14 recruiting class. Man, Mark Stoops really recruiting there. 7 offensive starters and 7 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 32.3 points per game. That was 36, and allowed just 21.6 points per game. That was 26. So pretty balanced last year, and I think they'll be pretty balanced this year. The only thing that's going to hurt them is I think South Carolina and Tennessee are going to be much better. So I don't think Kentucky as a team takes a step backwards, but because other teams will be better, that might make their record take a step backwards. But I agree with this ranking. Number 23, Cincinnati, down 4 spots. 13-1 last year, did make the playoffs. Number 42 recruiting class, 7 offensive starters, but only 2 defensive starters coming back. Last year they averaged 36.9 points per game. That was number 11, but allowed just 16.9 points per game, and that was number 5. And that's what's going to take a big hit this year. Their defense lost pretty much all of their starters, just 2 coming back. Cincinnati might be in for a rough year this year, maybe like an 8-4 or a 9-3. Just a fair warning, Bearcat fans. Number 24 on this list, Tennessee, up 2 spots. Weren't ranked on ESPN's last top 25. Last year they went 7-6. The number 18 recruiting class, 8 offensive starters and 8 defensive starters come back. Last year they averaged 39.3 points per game, which was number 7, but allowed 29.1 points per game, which was number 90. So they have to be better on their defense, and I think they will be better on their defense, and I agree with this ranking. Tennessee will be a top 25 team in 2022. Finally, number 25, that's going to be Iowa, down 10 spots. What happened for Iowa to get knocked down 10 spots in the offseason? That doesn't make much sense at all to me. Last year they went 10-4, number 30 recruiting class, 7 offensive stars and 7 defensive stars, so a lot of people come back this year. Last year they averaged 23.4 points per game. That was number 99 in the nation, not very good at all, but allowed just 19.2 points per game, which was number 13. I think their defense will be fine as usual. If that offense can just be a little bit better than what it was last year, Iowa could have another 10-win season. I think Iowa should be ranked a little bit higher, and don't sleep on Iowa in the Big Ten. They could get to the Big Ten championship again. So y'all let me know in the comments section what you think about these rankings and what happened for some of these teams to be bumped so high and some of these teams to be bumped so low. Somebody explain that to me. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.